Picture this. You are kneeling in the shadows of a medieval chapel, cold stone biting through your thin woolen tunic. Your breath fogs in the air. Candlelight flickers against the carved confessional, every flame stretching monstrous shapes across the walls. The hush is absolute, broken only by the distant echo of a bell and the barely audible shuffle of the priest behind the screen. Your hands are slick with sweat, pressed together in the oldest pose of supplication. You have never felt so exposed, so powerless. You're here for confession, but what you're about to experience will shatter everything you believed about forgiveness. The priest leans forward. His voice, low and steady, slices through the silence. Begin, my child. Spare no detail. His tone carries no comfort. The ritual is not for your solace, but for the extraction of your deepest, darkest secrets. The screen offers no protection. His eyes may be hidden, but you feel their weight as he listens. Listens for hesitation, listens for the tremor in your voice that betrays guilt. You've been told that confession is a sacred shelter, a safe haven for sinners. That's what most people still believe, that here, in this quiet box, you're meant to find peace. But that belief is nothing more than a mask. What you are about to endure is not mercy, it's interrogation. In the Middle Ages, confession was transformed from a humble, voluntary act into an elaborate system of surveillance, a machinery of control that reached into every corner of your life. Think the church was only interested in the state of your soul? Think again. Medieval confession was an exercise in power, an all-consuming ritual where your most private impulses became evidence. The questions come faster now. Did you harbor impure thoughts? With whom? What did you imagine? How many times? Did you ever act on these desires? Each question is more explicit than the last, each answer weighed and recorded. You can smell the incense burning in a nearby chapel. The aroma is heavy, almost suffocating. You want to believe it's there to purify your spirit, but tonight it feels more like a mask for the stench of fear. The confessional is not a sanctuary. It's a pressure chamber. And outside these walls, there are priests who keep careful notes, sometimes scribbled in the margins of their penitential manuals, sometimes carried word for word to their superiors. Your secrets, once spoken, may never truly disappear. But here's where it gets worse. You are not alone. The priest has a book, Libri Penitentiales, confession manuals filled with thousands of forbidden acts, written by men who believed that every sin, no matter how small, must be named and numbered. These handbooks list punishments for everything from marital pleasure to stray thoughts to forbidden dreams. The Penitential of Burchard of Worms, compiled around 1012, instructs the confessor to ask, "Did you lie with your spouse for pleasure alone, or to beget children? Did you touch yourself in secret? Did you speak impure words, even in jest?" The questions are not just prying. They are relentless, systematic, and inescapable. What you don't realize is that your confession is never just between you and God. The medieval priest is both judge and recorder, a gatekeeper for the salvation of your soul and the stability of the community. His questions are guided by law. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council made annual confession compulsory for every Christian in Western Europe. By the 13th century, manuals like the Summa de Casibus Penitentiae by Raymond of Peñafort catalogued sins with the precision of a ledger, preparing priests to interrogate every possible deviation from church teaching. You are no longer a penitent, you are a suspect. Each answer you give is a risk, each hesitation a signal. The confessor's silence grows heavier as you stammer through the litany of your faults. What if you forget something? What if you confess too much? The medieval world is built on suspicion. One misplaced word, and you could find yourself at the center of an inquiry. The church claims dominion over not just your actions, but your thoughts, your dreams, your most fleeting temptations. No part of you is safe, but the true horror of the medieval confessional is its reach. It doesn't end with adults. Children are summoned, made to kneel on the same cold stones, asked about the sensations they don't yet understand, the confusion of their dreams. Parents wait outside, convinced that this ritual will protect their children from sin. They have no idea what really happens inside. Priests trained in the art of spiritual investigation press for details, searching for the seeds of heresy or corruption. The confessional is where childhood innocence is dissected, catalogued, and sometimes weaponized. And the confessions do not die here. In some cases they are written down, locked away, but never forgotten. Priests who suspect heresy pass notes to inquisitors. Sometimes, years later, your words return as accusations, evidence in church courts or whispered in the ears of local lords. The fear is not only that you might be judged in the afterlife, but that you might be ruined in this one. The origins of this terror are ancient. Early Christian confession was public, a display of repentance before the whole congregation. By the 9th century, the practice had become private, but it was still voluntary, a matter of personal conscience. All of that changed when the Church began to see confession as a weapon for discipline and order. The line between salvation and surveillance blurred until there was no difference at all. Tonight, as you kneel, you finally understand. The confessional is a theater of dread. Its purpose is not to heal, but to expose, not to forgive, but to control. The priest's whispered questions will haunt you long after you leave this chapel. Your secrets are no longer yours. What you have experienced is only the beginning. The next revelation will make even these moments feel merciful. Soon, you will see how the Church used these secrets as weapons, how your confession could become evidence in court, how entire families and villages were torn apart by what was spoken in the shadows. And you will learn what happened to those who refused to confess, who tried to keep their souls to themselves and paid the ultimate price for silence. You're still kneeling, numb from the cold, when the priest's voice sharpens. The soft murmur of ritual is gone. Now each question is a demand, every word shaped for maximum precision, leaving no possibility for ambiguity or escape. Describe what you thought. Where were your hands? Did you seek pleasure on holy days? With whom did you speak in private? Did your mind stray to forbidden things? His tone is no longer gentle. It is prosecutorial, each query pressed with the force of centuries of doctrine behind it. Your tongue feels swollen, your throat dry as bone. The urge to lie, to soften the truth, is overwhelming, but the stories haunt you. The tales whispered in village squares of those who confessed too little and were summoned again and again, each visit a little colder, a little more dangerous. The confessor's questions drill deeper. Did your spouse tempt you? Did you speak of desire outside marriage? Did you utter impure words? Did you conceal anything during your last confession? The air grows heavier with each answer. The candlelight flickers as if threatened by a gust of unseen wind. This is not just penance. It's a test. You sense it now. You're being measured. Your words weighed and recorded. You feel exposed in a way you never imagined, as if your very soul is being peeled back for examination. The confessor does not write anything in your presence, but you see the quill and parchment ready on his side of the screen, a silent threat. Your confession is not forgotten, not by the Church and not by the world outside. The manuals the priest follows are not merely guides to spiritual health, they are weapons. The Penitential of Theodore, written in the late 7th century and still referenced centuries later, lists sexual sins in excruciating detail, prescribing punishments for every forbidden act. The Summa Confessorum of John of Freiburg, 1297, expands the arsenal. Ask whether the penitent has performed unnatural acts with spouse or stranger, whether with beasts, with their own hands, with words or thoughts. These are not gentle invitations to unburden yourself. They are surgical strikes, designed to uncover every trace of deviation. And yet, here's where it gets worse. You're not confessing to a man of God alone. You're confessing to an institution, a vast, unseen network of power that feeds on secrets. What you say here can be summoned as evidence. Inquisition records from the 14th century France reveal that priests kept written notes of confessions, especially when heresy or sexual deviance was suspected. A careless phrase can mean your private shame becomes public disaster. Imagine the terror when your neighbor's marriage collapses after a priest reveals in court what was said in confidence. You remember the story of Marguerite La Blanchard, whose confession of marital struggles was quietly relayed to her husband by the priest. Within weeks, she was cast from her home, her children forbidden from speaking her name. The priest's explanation: the welfare of the soul supersedes the rights of the penitent. Her secret became a weapon. The confessional, you realize, is no longer sacred. It is a legal document in the making. The priest can, and sometimes must, break the seal when heresy is suspected, when a crime is revealed, when secular authorities demand answers. In some towns, confession is used as a census, a way to monitor the movement of bodies and minds, the presence of strangers, the circulation of forbidden ideas. You are not a soul. You are a data point. You try to remember the rules, to calculate what will keep you safe. But the boundaries are shifting. Penance has teeth. You confess to impure thoughts, and the priest prescribes 7 days of fasting. You admit to lying, and he orders public penance, kneeling outside the church in rags, begging forgiveness as the village passes by. But now he wants more. "Tell me what you dreamed," he whispers. "Tell me what you did not say last time. Tell me who else sins with you." The penance is never enough. There's always another layer to uncover, but that's only the beginning. Sometimes the questions leave the body behind and focus on your mind, your dreams, the landscape of your imagination. The confessional becomes a hunting ground for witches, for heretics, for those whose thoughts stray beyond what the Church allows. In 1320, Inquisitor Bernard Gui recorded detailed instructions for detecting the seeds of heresy in confession, urging priests to pry into not just actions, but opinions, doubts, moments of fleeting skepticism. The dread grows. You know that if your answers stray too far from the expected script, if you show knowledge that is forbidden, if you mention the wrong book or the wrong person, your confession may not end with penance. It may end with an inquiry, or worse. Outside the church, life goes on. Children playing in the mud, vendors calling their wares, your neighbors glancing at you as you emerge. But you carry a new weight. You wonder, what if the priest shares what he knows? What if your words escape these walls? In many places, there are stories of priests blackmailing powerful men or using secrets to control wealthy families. In others, accusations of witchcraft begin with something whispered here, an innocent confession twisted into a noose. The confessional box is empty now, but the questions keep echoing. You lie awake at night, replaying every answer. Did you forget something? Did you say too much? Did you damn yourself by speaking or by remaining silent? And now, at this moment of dread, you realize just how little power you truly have. Your confession can become your prison. The priest is both shepherd and warden, and you, the penitent, are always at his mercy. Right now, you're feeling the full weight of this hidden machinery, how the confessional could turn your private shame into public ruin, how even your dreams could be used against you. If you want to keep uncovering these dark systems, the hidden engines that shaped not just the Middle Ages, but the world you live in today, subscribe now. Stay with this journey into the forbidden, and see what history never wanted you to know. The next revelation will change everything you thought was safe, because soon you'll discover how the Church's hunger for secrets would lead to persecution, torture, and the destruction of lives, all justified in the name of saving your soul. You rise from your knees with legs shaking, but the feeling of exposure only deepens. In the days after confession, the world outside seems subtly changed. You catch furtive glances from neighbors, overhear snatches of rumor in the market. Did you confess too much? Not enough? The priest's questions linger in your mind, growing sharper, more dangerous as the weeks pass. You begin to notice the pattern. Those who refuse to answer, who hedge or grow silent, are summoned again and again. In the parish ledger, their names are circled, underlined, annotated in the priest's careful hand. But the next time you are called, something is different. The interrogation no longer pretends at comfort. The priest's words are clipped, clinical. Have you been tempted by the devil? Do you dream of forbidden things? Has the Virgin appeared to you in visions, or do you hear other voices at night? Each question is more invasive than the last, as if he is peeling back the skin of your soul to search for heresy, madness, or worse. You realize that every confession is now a test of loyalty. A loyalty not to God, but to the institution that claims to speak for him. Your answers are not enough. The priest presses on. Describe your dreams. What did you see, hear, feel? He watches your face for signs of deception, scribbles notes you are not allowed to see. The chill in the air grows deeper, the smell of damp stone mixed now with a metallic tang of fear. You remember what happened to Anne from the next village over, a weaver's daughter who confessed to troubled dreams. The priest reported her words to the bishop. Within days, inquisitors arrived, strangers in black robes, their faces pale and unreadable. But here's where it gets truly twisted. The confessional has become a net, one that catches not only sin, but suspicion itself. You sense the trap tightening around you. In 1318, the Synod of Toulouse instructed confessors to report anyone whose beliefs or practices seemed contrary to the faith, even if no crime had been committed. Suddenly, confession is not a shield but a sword, and you stand defenseless. The questions spiral into nightmare. Do you know any spells? Do you keep secret books? Have you heard others blaspheme or spoken against the Church yourself? Your memory is tested, your innocence weaponized against you. You recall the story of the young farmer, Pierre of Rouergue, dragged from his home after an anonymous accusation, his only crime, an offhand complaint about church taxes muttered in the safety of the confessional. The priest, following the new inquisitorial guidelines, reported him. Pierre was never seen again. But this is only the beginning. The boundaries between confession and accusation dissolve. Inquisitors like Bernard Gui, famed for his Practica Inquisitionis, circulate detailed handbooks advising priests how to probe for the roots of heresy in their parishioners' minds. Guy's instructions are cold and methodical. Ask not only of deeds, but of words and thoughts, dreams and associations. Seek out subtle errors. Press for detail. Recurred hesitation. The confessional transforms into a courtroom. Your soul the case, your words the evidence. And still, the pressure grows. Your dreams become a source of terror. To speak of visions, of temptations, of doubts is to risk suspicion. But to conceal them is even more dangerous. You are caught in a trap with no exit. You think back to the market gossip of Agnes the miller's wife, who confessed to fleeting visions of a black cat in her dreams. The priest reported her as a possible consort of the devil. She was summoned before the village, forced to kneel in penance while her children wept. Her fate was a warning. Even your sleep is not safe from surveillance. The walls of your world shrink. You avoid speaking with neighbors, fearing that any conversation might be overheard and twisted into a charge. The confessional itself has become a threat, a place where the line between voluntary admission and forced accusation blurs to nothing. Do you harbor resentment? Do you question doctrine? Have you failed to report another's sin? These are the questions that now define your worth. And then the final revelation. The confessional is not merely a tool of repentance, but of persecution. Records from the Inquisition in Aragon, 1325, detail how priests, pressured by inquisitors, coaxed parishioners into implicating their friends, family, even spouses. One wrong word could doom not just yourself, but those you love. Confession, once the Church's greatest promise of mercy, has become the most insidious of weapons. The priest's questions follow you into waking and sleep. You can never confess enough, never be certain that what you say will not be used against you. In this world, silence itself is guilt, and survival depends on navigating a labyrinth of secrets with no safe exits. But what you don't know, what you are about to see, is how these methods escalate further, bleeding out from the confessional into the very fabric of daily life. The hunger for control does not end with your private thoughts. The next act will reveal what happens when confession itself triggers mass suspicion, unleashing forces that no one, not priest, nor peasant, nor king, can contain. You step out of the confessional, convinced that you have survived the worst. But the world that greets you has changed. A chill runs deeper than mere stone and weather. Rumors ripple through the village, subtle as a knife's edge. A baker's apprentice, pale and shivering, won't meet your gaze. Your neighbor's wife averts her eyes. Something unspoken lingers between everyone. A shared, silent fear, as if the ground itself has become unstable. It starts quietly. A single confession, spoken in dread and shame, is not contained. Word seeps from priest to bishop, bishop to lord, lord to official. Within days, the priest's private notes are summoned by secular authorities. They demand the records, not just of crimes confessed, but of suspicions, of dreams, of stray words about faith or authority. The secrets you spilled in the darkness now circulate in the daylight, taken from the sacred to the profane. The confessional has become a lever, one that can pry open lives and shatter trust. You hear the stories. In 1330, in the small town of Émoutier, a confessor's private records were seized after a suspected outbreak of heresy. Dozens of villagers found their most intimate admissions, doubts, anxieties, forbidden thoughts, read aloud before the court. For many, it was not the sin but the suspicion that destroyed them. Once your name is spoken in that context, there is no way back. This is the nightmare of the institutionalized confessional. One whispered secret, one misunderstood phrase, can trigger a chain reaction. Families torn apart, neighbors divided, children watching as parents are shunned. A farmer you know well, Martin, who always greeted you at market, disappears after a rumor that he spoke against a saint's relic. The priest, pressured by new mandates from the diocese, surrendered his confession. The accusation, once planted, grows like rot. Martin's wife is forced to kneel outside the church for a fortnight, weeping as her children are forbidden to speak her name. You sense the terror infecting daily life. Church bells that once signaled comfort now ring with menace. Every visit to the chapel is a risk. What you say in the confessional might not stay there. It can become evidence in a legal dispute, a weapon in a feud, a pretext for stripping you of your land or rights. Documents from the Council of Basel, 1431, show the formalization of these practices. Church courts demanding priests break the seal of confession for grave causes, and priests threatened with excommunication if they refused. But here's where it gets more chilling. The machinery of suspicion begins to run on its own. Children are questioned at catechism, pressed for details about their parents' habits. Spouses interrogate each other, fearful of being named by association. The priest himself becomes a figure of dread, his questions probing, his silences more ominous than any sermon. You overhear a parishioner murmuring about a neighbor's strange prayers. The next week, that neighbor is gone. The boundary between sacred and secular collapses. The priest is not just a spiritual advisor, but an informant, sometimes against his will. Under new legal codes, secular officials can compel the church to surrender confession records in cases of suspected sedition or blasphemy. The lines in the sand, once drawn by faith, now blur under the pressure of politics and fear. The village is unraveling. You see it in the way people avoid each other in the lanes, the way gossip crackles at the well. Every misfortune is now suspect. When the miller's child falls ill, neighbors whisper about curses. When a fire destroys a barn, they speak of divine punishment. And always lurking behind it all is the knowledge that anything you say, even in the secrecy of confession, can come back as accusation. But the most devastating blow comes when a respected family is torn apart by the machinery they once trusted. The widow Hélène, long revered for her piety, is denounced after her son's confession is read aloud at the bishop's inquiry. The boy's fears, of devils, of doubts, of dreams he barely remembers, are twisted into evidence of familial heresy. Hélène is cast out, her family's land seized, her name forbidden in church prayers. The village watches in silence, learning that no one is immune. You realize that the fear itself has become a weapon, one wielded by church and crown alike. The confessional is no longer a place of refuge, but a theater of exposure, a stage on which your most private self is paraded for judgment. Every secret you carry is a potential curse, every admission a key that could unlock disaster. And now you begin to understand the true horror. The system is self-perpetuating. Suspicion breeds confession. Confession breeds suspicion. The cycle tightens, leaving no space for trust or grace. You are left wondering who might be next, who will be called to kneel before priest and Lord, to have their secrets laid bare. What you don't know is that this is only the precursor. The next revelation will show you the final transformation of confession, from a psychological weapon into an instrument of torture, where silence itself becomes the most unforgivable sin, and suffering is sanctified in the name of salvation. The worst is still to come. You wake in the middle of the night, sweat freezing against your skin, heart pounding in your ears. The echoes of the priest's voice won't fade, nor the shadow of the confessional where you surrendered secrets you never intended anyone to hear. Now you realize that nothing you confessed is truly gone. The village is quieter than ever. Doors shut, windows dark, children kept close. Whispers spread faster than the wind. You fear your own voice and what it might reveal if tested. But soon, confession is no longer just a matter of public humiliation or social suspicion. You are summoned to the church not for penance, but for judgment. The lines between confessor and interrogator, between the church and the law, dissolve. The chapel is transformed. No longer a sanctuary, it's a tribunal, a place where your whispered admissions will be measured against pain and fear, and where silence itself is treated as the gravest sin. The priest does not come alone. He is joined by notaries, local lords, sometimes even men whose faces you do not recognize, scribes with ink-stained fingers, and men in dark woolen hoods who ask for the records. The bishop's seal is pressed into the wax on every document. Your name is on a list. You are called forward, forced to kneel in front of a panel that seems to grow larger with every heartbeat. This is not confession. It is inquisition. Their questions are relentless, delivered with mechanical precision. Did you recant any part of your confession? Have you omitted anything? Did you commit the acts as described? They compare your words to those of your neighbors, to those written by priests in distant towns. Contradictions are not forgiven. Hesitations are noted as evidence. The pressure mounts. Your mouth is dry, your hands tremble, and you can feel your world closing in. But here's where the horror deepens beyond anything you imagined. Inquisition records from the 14th and 15th centuries describe how confession becomes fused with punishment. If your answers are not satisfactory, if you hesitate, if your story shifts, if you protest your innocence, your ordeal does not end. The panel can order that you be taken to the lower chamber, beneath the church, where light barely touches the stone. There, the tools of penance take on a new form. Chains hang from the walls. A rack stands against the far end of the chamber. The inquisitors describe their actions not as cruelty, but as spiritual medicine. Medicina animarum, they call it. The care of souls. If you will not confess more, if you refuse to denounce others, the Church claims the right to force the truth from your body. The use of torture is justified by a single, chilling logic. It is better to save the soul through suffering than to allow the disease of heresy to spread. You remember the stories, but nothing prepares you for the reality. The Dominican Inquisitor Bernard Gui, whose Practica Inquisitionis became the model for interrogations across Europe, advised, "Begin gently, with questions and persuasion. But if the accused remains obstinate, then proceed to the tormenta, for the good of his immortal soul. And so you are stripped, bound, made to endure cold water, beating, stretching, or worse, all while being urged to confess. The air in the dungeon is thick with old screams. You taste blood and dust on your tongue. Each question, each demand, is now backed by pain. The faces above you are expressionless, intent on their task. If you scream, you are told that suffering purifies. If you beg for mercy, they remind you that only full confession brings relief. There is no safe word. There is only surrender or silence, and both lead to ruin. But the cruelty is not only physical. The Church has mastered psychological torment as well. After each session, you are dragged back before the panel. They read aloud your new confession, comparing it line by line with your earlier admissions, your neighbor's words, and the priest's careful notes. Any discrepancy is cause for another round, another descent into darkness. Some break quickly, naming names, friends, family, anyone who might buy a moment's reprieve. Others refuse and are broken anyway. Here is the final horror. Your suffering is witnessed. Public penance is demanded after private torment. You are forced to kneel in rags outside the church, shackled and shivering as your neighbors pass by. The priest reads your crimes from the pulpit. Children are warned to avert their eyes. Your name becomes a lesson in obedience. Your pain an instrument of discipline. What you do not realize is that even after the wounds heal, the shame does not fade. Records are kept, pages inked with your confessions, signed and sealed, sent to bishops and lords. These archives become weapons, brought out years later to settle feuds, to justify further persecution. The village remembers, and so does the Church. But the worst fate awaits those who refuse to confess at all. There are cases buried in the records of the Spanish Inquisition and the courts of Avignon, of men and women who maintained their innocence to the end. Some died in the darkness, broken by hunger and cold. Others were condemned as unrepentant, burned, drowned, or left to rot as a warning to all who might guard a secret. This is the end of mercy, the fusion of confession and torture, a machinery that transforms the desire for forgiveness into a system of control more brutal than any sin. You begin to understand that survival is no longer about truth, but about endurance, about saying what is needed to survive the next hour, the next day. But even this is not the final act. What remains is the normalization, the way fear, shame, and violence become woven into daily life, accepted as the price of salvation. Soon, you will see how this system not only survived, but thrived, how it was justified, celebrated, and made a part of the fabric of every community, generation after generation. The confessional's shadow is not easily dispelled. You're summoned once more, this time before the bishop himself. Word has spread. The crowd gathers in the square outside the church. Your name echoes on the lips of those you once called friends, spoken in whispers and sideways glances. The confessional has followed you here, not as a private space but as a stage for public reckoning. You are not alone. Others kneel beside you. Neighbors, kin, the baker's son, the miller's wife. Some stare straight ahead, hollow-eyed, while others tremble as the priest reads from the Book of Confessions. The bishop presides in scarlet and gold, flanked by priests holding ink-stained ledgers. Your secrets once whispered in darkness are now the foundation of accusation and punishment. The records are read aloud. You confess to dreams of heresy, to impure thoughts, to doubting the sacraments. For a moment you can barely hear the words. Your heartbeat drowns everything else. You want to shout that it was fear, confusion, a moment of weakness. But here, intent doesn't matter. Guilt is collective, contamination spreads from one name to the next. Now comes the most shocking revelation. This is not an extraordinary event. This is the system's design. What you endure is repeated across hundreds of villages, decade after decade. The Church's power depends on the normalization of suspicion, on the idea that anyone at any time might become the object of public discipline. This machinery has made confession a tool for forging obedience, teaching generation after generation that the safest course is silence, and that trust, even in oneself, is perilous. But here's where the horror reaches its peak. The public reconciliation, the forced penance, the ritual humiliation. All of it serves to bind you to the very system that destroyed your privacy. You kneel in sackcloth while the bishop demands the crowd forgive you, but the forgiveness is only for show. The lesson is not grace, but warning. As your tears drip into the dust, you realize that you have become an example. Your pain is their boundary, your exposure is their safety, at least for now. Contemporary accounts from 15th century Germany describe how these scenes play out in detail. The priest reciting confessions, the bishop's formal judgment, the villagers pressed tight in silence, watching as shame is rendered into order. For the authorities, each display is a triumph. For the penitent, it is an ending. Even when the crowd disperses, your world remains smaller, ringed with suspicion. You have learned what every medieval soul learns, that confession is not absolution, but the price you pay to remain within the fold. This is the true legacy. Over generations, these rituals of exposure and discipline become ordinary. The mechanisms of surveillance move from confession to daily life. Families regulate their own. Mothers interrogate children, husbands judge wives. Suspicion, once imposed from above, now grows from within. In every village, the confessional shadow lingers. No one dares to question the rules too openly, because everyone has learned the same lesson. Secrets are dangerous, silence is suspicious, and truth is always a risk. But what you don't expect is how these systems endure. The rituals of medieval confession, the surveillance of thought and desire, do not end with the Middle Ages. They persist in subtler forms, shifting from church to state, from public squares to private hearts. The logic remains: confession as control, shame as discipline, public spectacle as deterrent. Tonight, as you lie awake, you understand at last. You have witnessed not just the horror of a single system, but the blueprint for how power survives, by dividing, by shaming, by making every individual complicit in their own subjugation. The most intimate spaces are never truly safe. You have become both victim and participant, guardian and prisoner. And as dawn breaks, you realize that the confessional was never only about faith. It was about fear, about the normalization of surveillance, about the cost of conformity, about how easily shame can be weaponized. It's a lesson that will echo for centuries, long after the names and faces change. You entered this story believing that confession was a refuge. Now you know it was a stage, a cage, a mechanism for keeping the world in line. If this journey into the hidden machinery of power has awakened your understanding, if seeing the confessional's true shadow has made you question what else might be lurking in history's dark corners, subscribe now. Continue unearthing the truths that institutions tried to erase, and claim your place among those who refuse to look away. Because the next secret is always closer than you think.